Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Welcome, everyone, to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano. Great to have you joining us here today on the show. Want to take a minute to tell you about our sponsors, Compassion International, the most trusted child development ministry in the world. It's $38 a month, tax deductible, and an opportunity for you to release a child from poverty. Compassion International does it right. We are so grateful to have them as sponsors, as partners with us here at Sports Spectrum. And again, the opportunity to release a child from poverty. We're talking about food, education, medical care, vocational training, all done in the name of Jesus. They do such great work, and you can get involved. Go to the website, compassion.com/sportspectrum, compassion.com/sportspectrum. You see a list of children there waiting to be released from poverty. Pray about it, obviously. Check with your family, see where God is leading you, and consider it. Consider releasing a child from poverty by sponsoring them with Compassion International. Again, the website, compassion.com/sportspectrum, and pray about releasing a child from poverty today. Really excited to welcome Dr. George Barber, the men's basketball coach at Greenville University in Southern Illinois, a Division III school. And Dr. Barber, Coach Barber, as he likes to be known, and you'll hear me reference that in the very beginning of the podcast, is such a unique man with a great story and a unique journey. He's also a professor, that being the doctor side of Dr. Barber, professor of Kinesiology and Sport at Greenville University. But he got to start as a coach. In 1996, he was a part of the Kentucky Wildcats Championship Club. Imagine getting your start at Kentucky with the Wildcats and winning a national championship. He was also a former assistant coach at Bradley University, and now he's doing amazing things at Greenville University. In 2019, last year, 2018-2019 season, playing in the St. Louis Intercollegiate Athletic Conference, Greenville set an all-time record. Originally, I thought it was just an NCAA Division III record, but it's actually a record for all divisions and all basketball, averaging 135.1 points per game. 135 points per game. If you know anything about basketball, that number should just make your eyes pop out of your head. It's mind-blowing to think you could average 135 points per game. But that's what Coach Barber's team at Greenville did last year. They also led the country in assists, steals, turnover margin, total assists, three-point field goals attempted, three-point field goals made. They set all sorts of records, culminating on February 2nd, 2019, when his club, the Greenville University Club, scored 200 points in a regulation game. 200 points. Lots to talk about here with Coach George Barber from Greenville University. Take a listen to his story here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. Coach Barber, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Jason. It is great to be with you today.
It's Dr. Barber and Coach Barber. So which do you prefer? Because I would want everybody calling me doctor if I had the doctor in my title.
I hear you. So it is both. I do have my doctoral degree. It's a doctorate in education from University of Kentucky back in the 90s. But I like the moniker. I like the title of coach. That to me is a higher, more personal, relational title. And so if you call me coach, I will love it.
Well, I will call you coach. Absolutely, coach. Now, tell me about Greenville University, because I think a lot of people listening might not know where that is. It's a D3 school in Missouri, but tell us a little bit about Greenville and kind of, what brought you there.
So you set that up perfectly. When I left Kentucky, I had been, working with guys that are now in the NBA. Frank Vogel, who's now the head coach of the Lakers, was my, on the road, one of my roommates. Yeah. Billy Donovan and I were on a similar staff. I had a different role. As he moved up and on, I was, moved into a spot. But when I call those guys and say, I'm at Greenville, they say, well, how do you like it there in South Carolina? And of course, I say, Well, it's not in South Carolina, and actually, Jason, it's not even in Missouri. It's in Illinois.
There you go. So I messed up too.
You're close. It's Southern Illinois, not too far from St. Louis, and we're a Christian college. We've been around since 1892, so over a century, and we are Division III. We've had roughly between 750 and 1,000 students while I've been here. I've been here for 20 years. So small school, Division III school, Southern Illinois Christian school, associated with the Free Methodist Church. And but we have a lot that come here that are either don't really not sure where their faith is at. So you don't have to necessarily be a Christian to attend. And but we are thoroughly a Christian school, and have been ever since the founding in 1892. So
you mentioned Kentucky. I was going to wait a little bit, but I think this is a perfect time to go right there, because that's where you sort of, began your basketball journey in a lot of ways, and you happen to do it for a pretty great coach in Rick Pitino. You mentioned Frank Vogel, Billy Donovan, and that 1996 Kentucky Wildcats championship team. You were a part of that group. So take us back, I guess, and start there with how Kentucky came into the picture of George Barber.
Right. Well, that's a great story. And the short answer is, the Lord provided that position. I mean, because I was a guy when I was in high school. I went to a large 4A school in North Carolina, and I'd try out for the team, and the coach would say to my dad, "Hey, George is a great guy. He has a huge heart. He's enthusiastic. If I could take his heart and stick it in this guy, we'd have a good player. But he's not going to make the team. So could he wrestle? Because we don't really have anybody that small to wrestle in that weight class." And then I went to Asbury College, and I played. I think I always tease my career was more in baseball than basketball. And I was in the 30-30 club for basketball, meaning if we're 30 up or 30 down, I might get in the game. So for a guy to, work at Kentucky, the all-time winningest basketball program, in our nation, that's a pretty incredible thing. So the Lord, I think that's a sort of an answer to prayer. I remember praying in my dorm room. I said, "Lord, I'll do anything you want me to do. I feel called to serve you." This is my sophomore year at Asbury, but I would like to coach, and so, in a lot of ways, it's the answer to prayer. And I remember, I actually was at Kentucky twice, both in the late 80s with Eddie Sutton, and then again, and by the way, Dwayne Casey, who is another guy in the NBA that I know. But then again in the 90s, and in the 90s, got my doctoral degree, and we won a national championship, and I was on coach's staff. I mean, I was like administrative assistant, it's now called grad assistant coach. And I knew Coach Pitino was a great coach. The only thing he had not done was win a national championship. So I was, determined and dedicated to helping him win that, because, it says, like in Jeremiah, if it goes well for those over you, it will go well for you. And so obviously I was trying to do everything to make it go well for Coach, and we had a great team. We won the whole thing in 96.
Yeah, that was I'm putting my brain on here. That was Syracuse, and that game was played in New Jersey, right? At the Meadowlands.
Yeah, that's right. So
go ahead. What was that season like?
Yeah, billed as New York, but it was the Meadowlands. So we were so good, Jason, at the beginning of the year, and we had we ended up having 9 guys from that team of 13 go on and play in the NBA.
Wow.
So if you can imagine, your first 4 guys off the bench are also NBA players,
Yeah.
That was before the one and done, and so it was amazing. And I looked at that team the first 2-3 weeks of practice, and I told one of the managers, I said, I don't think we're going to lose a game. I mean, and that's rare, as a coach. I mean, you have 30 games in front of you, and you're thinking, how, but we were really good at every position and deep, and we pressed, and Pitino kind of got you to play over your head. Like he made you believe you could do things that maybe you didn't think you could do. I mean, that's the secret to his success, is to just to get people to buy in and do more than they ever thought. So, and the only 2 games we lost to Marcus Camby and UMass I guess it was called the Palace back then. It was in Detroit. And we could not stop Camby that night. He was just going off, and we couldn't stop him. And then we lost to a guy named Dante Jones in Mississippi State in the SEC championship game down in New Orleans. And both of those teams, would you believe, were both in the Final Four.
Yeah, that's right.
So the two teams we lost to also were Final Four teams. And then we played UMass, beat them in the Final Four, and got to play Syracuse. And Tony Delk, thank goodness for that young man. He made 7 threes against that 2-3 zone that Syracuse has. And I have a little cameo where I'm on the bench, and Tony shoots a 3-point shot and is fouled and falls into the bench. And I kind of, get an arm dig, yes. And that's like the famous clip from that game. So we beat them. We beat Syracuse, and it was magical. It was fun. I mean, Coach Pitino on the bus ride home said, nobody can take this away from you for this year, 1996. You did it. And the people were great in Lexington. We came back and hung the banner, and it was just surreal. I mean, anybody would say that if you win a championship, but it was surreal.
Oh, yeah. And that team had Tony Delk, Antoine Walker, Walter McCarty, Derek Anderson, Ron Mercer. I mean, it was stacked. Nazi Muhammad was on the bench, not even playing, and he ended up in the NBA.
He was a JV player.
Right.
Guys, he was a JV player.
Exactly.
I promise you. I mean,
and then he still went on to play 15 years or whatever it was in the NBA. So What a stacked team. Now, let's fast forward a little bit, Coach, because one of the reasons, and the more unique reasons, I didn't even know this, and I forgive me for not. I remembered hearing about this story, but your team last year now, as we move forward to the men's basketball team at Greenville University, averaged last year, I want people to hear this when I say this, averaged 135 points in a game, set the NCAA Division III record in scoring offense, and led the country in assists and steals, turnover margin, total assists, so many records last year.
Right.
And you actually scored 200 points in a game. So I want to kind of unpack last year, and we'll talk about this year in a minute. But what would prompt you to kind of move into an offense that would want to run up and down? It reminds me, honestly, of the Loyola Marymount team. I'm old enough to remember in the late 80s, around 1990 or so, with Hank Gathers and Paul Westhead and Bo Kimball and those guys that averaged 120 or something a game.
Right.
What type of offense are you running that would get these guys and to see it be successful in averaging 135 a game?
So that's great. And so that, again, the answer to that, the offense that we're running is the system. With a capital T and a capital S.
Right.
And wherever you see the letter E, small letter E, we just insert a 3. Mm-hmm. So it's like a 3-point shot.
Mm-hmm.
But it really is a unique style of play. It is Westhead. We have a different defense than him. It's also, there's a guy in Iowa named Dave Arsenault, and he developed a lot of this style of play at a small school called Grinnell. And they did this. They've done this for like 15 years, maybe 20. Arsenault is what I would call a pioneer. So is Westhead. I mean, these men, they are not creative. They're not ingenuitive. They are pioneers. I mean, they are like breaking new ground in how you play basketball. And so there's a book out called Coaching the System by Gary Smith and Doug Porter. And both of those men, Smith was out at California Redlands. Porter was with a women's team, Olivet Nazarene. So they wrote this book. Well, here's what happened with me. My administration came to me and said, hey, we want you to have a JV team. So now you're going to go from 15 to 30 on your squad, or 12 to 24 or whatever, double the size of your squad.
Yeah.
So I was like, how am I going to engage that many guys on the court? Like, how, how am I going to engage them? Because if they're not on the varsity bus, they may lose interest, and I will lose ministry opportunity with them. So I started looking into a style of play that would engage more players. That was the genesis. And then as we got into it, honestly, Jason, I didn't think we would win, but we've won the conference 3 out of the last 4 years. We set the national scoring record, not only for Division III, but for all divisions and NBA. Nobody scored averaged 135 points a game. And very rarely, this happened before 2 times, but rarely has anyone scored 200. And we scored 200. And I would say, too, our 200 was really legit because it was a conference school, a school that beat us last year in double overtime for a combined score, Division III record, scoring record. So, it wasn't like we just brought in St. Mary's of the Plain and beat them down.
Right.
I mean, it was like if you take, it was 200 to 144. If it's a 100-point game, that's 100 to 76. So, or 74. So we, it was pretty legit, and it was amazing. That was also like going to the moon. I mean, it was just a very, very rare thing that, and about 6 minutes ago, I looked up at the scoreboard. We had 173. They kept running with us. And I said to the assistant, I said, if they keep trying to score, we will too, because you can be up 30 in this style of play and another team come back and get you.
Yeah.
Because it's all about shooting threes and playing very fast. So anyways,
200
they kept trying
points.
to score. And
yeah,
we got it with just a couple seconds left on the clock. And not until the last minute did the other coach say, hey, I didn't think you were really going for 200. I was like, really? So, but we've made amends. I apologize if I was, unsporting-like with that. But then he said, nah, I kind of understand. I can understand now. That's like a holy grail of the system, to see if you can score 200. So
yeah,
we're okay now. I brought him a tie. And I said, can we make up? I mean, he's like, sure. He was a great guy. So
I love that. That was February 2nd of this year, 2019.
Yeah, senior
you guys
night.
won senior night. And I saw a YouTube clip, and it was a brief clip, so it really didn't do it justice, but it showed the point, the time when you guys scored the 200th point, and the fans went nuts when the game ended and kind of ran on the court. And it was a really cool moment. So, yeah, you mentioned the sportsmanship kind of aspect to it. I wanted to ask you that because this is a faith and sports podcast, obviously. You're a man of faith, and I want to hear your testimony in a minute. But walk me through that fine line that a lot of us walk through where it's like you don't want to run up the score and certainly play in a way that's disrespectful to another team. And yet you kind of explain, like, listen, they're going to keep playing. We're going to keep playing. But there is a point you recognized it where 200 was a cool and a monumental number to reach. So what was that like, kind of walking through that moment as a coach when you're seeing this opportunity come your way?
Right. And you're exactly right, Jason. It happens very real time. Like you could never go down the locker room and say, hey guys, let's score 200 tonight. I mean, it just would never happen.
Yeah.
So, but like we've scored 100.5. In the book, the system says, hey, we've had teams that score 100.5. We've never been able to put together 2 halves to get 200. So we don't know if it can be done. But, I guess technically like a 2-hour marathon, it could if everything just lined up. So with this particular game and the sportsmanship piece, which is always tricky, and not everybody's going to agree with what we did, and I get that, and I honor that. So, but the coach, like I said, was a friend of mine, 20-year friend, a very competitive guy, and he had beat me in double overtime the year before, and so I thought if there's anybody that would understand, me going for the 200-point record, he would. And then in the end, when we had our conversation, which I went over to the school and I said, hey, Lance, I apologize if I misread the situation because, I thought that you would be a guy that would understand. And he said, well, I really do appreciate your apology because it did hurt me when it was happening. And he said, but I did not realize it was happening until the last minute of the game.
Yeah.
And so I said, now, come on, really? And he said, yeah, I guess I should bear some of that responsibility because I did keep playing with you. I did not wave the white flag. I kept running and, shooting and trying to kind of scrap back, into the game. So he said, I need to bear some responsibility. So we arrived at a really good point. We hugged. had a chance to, kind of talk through it. And he sent me a text later that day and said, thanks for coming by. I had gone to his school to talk with him. And, he said, we're friends for life. So
that's a great
story. I felt
story.
really good about that. But it did take, the effort of setting up a meeting, going over and saying, I apologize. Please forgive me if I misread the situation. And at first he said, yeah, you need to apologize. And then as we kind of continued to talk, he said, but I bear some of the responsibility. So, and I'm glad that we could do something like this special together. And he goes, I bet you will hit 200 again, is what he said. I said, I doubt it, Lance. I mean, everything has to go right in one day. But anyways,
that's a great lesson,
kind of
though, isn't it? Like biblical wise, that's a really great lesson in humility and empathy and forgiveness, all of those kind of things, right, Coach?
Yeah, I hope so. I think so. I mean, it was a really special thing, and even thinking about it to this day, I mean, I have a lot of people that said, "Wow, 200 points," and that's the special thing. Like 196, 198. But to get to the 200 it's just unheard of. So I think everybody's on the same page now. Yeah.
I love it. He is Dr. George Barber, the men's basketball coach at Greenville University. Coach, I haven't asked you about your testimony yet. So why don't you share that with us, your faith testimony, and kind of how your walk with the Lord took shape?
So that's a great question. And I would say this. I mean, I kind of alluded to it back when I was at Asbury University, and it was college then. But I was a phys ed major. I wanted to coach. I was asked by the phys ed department to help coach the basketball team my senior year. So it tells you probably better coach than player. But the situation was where I just said, Lord, I want to give you my life and I would like to coach. So, but you take it and I'll do whatever you want me to do. And the Lord has truly blessed me. Just a quick story. 2 or 3 years ago, I was interested because you have to see my practices, Jason. They're like a circus. I mean, this year I have 42 guys on the team, 42. And it's just amazing how we have them all scripted. I have a microphone just to get them to do stuff, but they're all on board. But I was interested in playing music at practice because I had heard that Pete Carroll of the Seattle Seahawks football coach also did that. I called Coach, and I called him and I said, Coach Carroll, my team scores 130 points a game. Can I come to practice? Does that get me at the table with you at practice? Because I heard you played music at the practice, and I'm interested in doing that for part of my practices. And I mean, it wasn't that easy as me just picking up the phone and calling him, but I got a person that knew him, whatever, and I was able to go to practice. He invited me out to Seattle. So I go out there, and he is so gracious and so nice to me during practice and says, I love your team. Keep doing what you're doing. And when we got in the car after the practice, my buddy said, I can't believe how great he was to you. What did you learn? And I started to say all these things about enthusiasm and how John Wooden, stories that he told me about John Wooden. And I stopped and I said, no, here's what my takeaway is, that God sees us and God cares about us. Mm-hmm. I mean, to let a coach from a little Division III school go with a national championship football and a Super Bowl football champion coach, and for him to treat me great and treat me just like I'm on equal, playing field with him, it just shows me God sees us and cares about us. Yeah. And so, I feel like God's just done that. Anytime I get blue, I go, hey, remember you coached at Kentucky? Mm-hmm. And I go, that's a pretty big miracle. So, God's got this. And I think that's just a big part of my testimony. It's just hearkening back to those times that God, has shown me through many various ways that he sees us and he cares about us.
So you obviously, you're coaching at a Christian school. You said not every player or even every student is a Christian at that point, but it gives you a unique opportunity to do ministry in your vocation, both as a coach, but you're also a professor, I believe, right, of kinesiology and sport. So it gives you a unique opportunity to really bring your faith into the workplace. So what does that look like as you go about being a coach? Obviously, there's a lot of demands in being a coach, but also a professor and being able to pour into these young players through the lens of a Christian university and your own faith.
Right. That's just such a blessing. I mean, I think if I was at a secular school, I mean, I know I talk to a lot of coaches that are secular schools, and it's more difficult, obviously, to be overt about your faith and to share your faith. And so you're encouraged to do that here. And again, maybe the Lord has just put me in this spot because he knows this is the best place for me. And I'll tell you, when you're at a place for 20 years, I call my friends that are in the NBA and Division I or whatever, and they're just like, we can't believe you've been coaching at the same place for 20 years. I mean, that's just not very, heard of. And I think when you're at a place for that long, you can have influence. And so, the Lord has opened those doors for me to be here, stay here, and be able to share my faith. I have a mentor. He's passed on now. His name's Frosty Westering. Was at Pacific Lutheran. He was a football coach. He was a big FCA guy. And I went and visited Frosty, and he gave us a lot of things, and we call it make the big time where you are. So even at a small school where, nobody knows where we're at, hardly. I mean, even you, Jason, was like, we're in Missouri. We're in Illinois. Yeah. You're sort of toiling in obscurity. But being at a Christian school, God is bigger than that, can transcend that, and you can have an impact. And we say, like 1 to the 30th power. So one person affecting one other person, and they in turn affecting one other person with the gospel, sharing the gospel over a 30-year period, literally can reach 1 billion people. So, don't get discouraged. You can have impact even at a small school, sort of obscure, sort of toiling in obscurity. You can still have an impact. And we always say, too, 20-year return. I mean, we don't know some of the seeds that we planted. When we have our Devos, even this morning, it was scatter seeds. This is in staff meeting. Because you just don't know which ones are going to take root. And so
that's
keep
great.
Trying.
Absolutely. Keep pushing forward. Now, we mentioned this season, so this upcoming season, we're going to be running this in mid to late November, maybe even in as early as December. So the season would have already started a little bit. And who knows, maybe you got 220 points by that point. You never know, Coach. But
I don't know.
I would say, as you prepare for this season, what's sort of the motto or mantra that your team has? Most teams have goals, obviously, and maybe a mantra that they kind of go by. What is yours for this year's team?
Right. So we choose so many different things. Last year was building men for others. Before that, it was make the big time where you are. This year, right now, we're focusing on playing biblically. That's what it's called. And so we call it the big time lessons before each practice, half an hour. The guys sit and take notes, and we have a little mini lecture. Is playing biblically. So we're working on those principles, and that's going to be our motto this year, playing biblically.
Playing biblically. I love it. Now, Coach, last question here a couple last questions here.
Sure, no problem.
I love asking this question to coaches. Who pours into you? So how do you stay poured into, because you're empty in the tank when you're a coach, right? You're going all out. You got assistant coaches. I had a 2-hour practice this morning. Absolutely. There you go.
So 2 meetings. Yeah.
So how do you stay poured into? Who pours into you?
So there's different things. First of all, I have a wonderful wife. So, and not everybody's blessed with a spouse. I have been blessed with a spouse that understands, and that's good. And we do prayer time and read scripture most every morning, about five days a week. We really try to commit to do that. And it doesn't have to be super formal. It's almost like just roll over in the bed, grab the devotional, read it, and pray. But it's just so powerful. The other thing is I have a prayer partner that I've had. He was the former AD, and now he's a dean. His name is Doug Faulkner. And we have sort of a general rule that if one of us asks the other to pray, that we will not say no. So we'll confess to each other, we'll pray to each other, and we have a little prayer room on campus that most of the time, 90% of the time, we can retreat to get, to pray for each other, to get renewed. And of course, I have my church and I have a wonderful pastor, Deb Somerville, and our church. And so there's a lot of different ways, but the time with my wife and the time with my prayer partner are two things that I just really, really won't let go of. Just try to be committed to and make sure we make time for that, because I've just seen the Lord answer prayer so many times. And Doug and I, over that 15-year period, it's almost surreal. We'll pray for something, and then, sometime later, we'll see answers to that prayer. And it just keeps boosting our confidence to pray with each other, pray for others. And like if I call him and he's watching TV or something, or has dinner with his wife, and I say, we need to pray, he'll say, well, I can't now, but we'll do it tonight. We'll do it at 9. We'll do it at 10. So it's just we're just really committed to that. And that is so helpful in filling each other's tanks, that in order for us to go back out into that battlefield. Everything is a battlefield, I almost feel like, as a coach, and
Absolutely.
Just life is like that. So
absolutely. Coach, this has been great. Thank you so much for being here on the show. Last question we always ask to all of our guests. What are you learning from the Lord now? What is Jesus teaching you today? Because we learn something new every day. We're always renewing our minds and renewing our spirits. What's he teaching you right now?
Well, so this is a lesson that you would never sign up for, but humility is what's happening. We graduated 9 last year, so we have a lot of new guys in the program. Of course, we had that record-setting year. And, I think more eyes are on us now because of our style of play, because of some of the records we set. And so, getting this new group ready to play and up to speed, playing at the speed that we play, which is insane, and getting them to sort of wrap their minds around being an empty cup.
Yeah.
And if they come in with the idea of how to do things, it's going to get changed, so they got to be empty cup. So it's just really humbling to have to start over a lot, but humility is just such a big part of sport. And so I'm glad for it. I think it's good, but sometimes you just have to guard against being blue or discouraged, because you're like, where did all my 9 seniors go that I had last year? They're not here.
Yeah.
And we got to train these new guys. And so it's a slow process, but humility, that would be the thing I think that's I'm being taught now, and glad for it, because losing is a better teacher than winning. That's for sure. So.
I completely agree on that every day. I always say adversity is the greatest teacher.
Yes.
Dr. George Barber, Coach Barber, thank you for being here on the show. Hopefully we'll get you back, and wish you nothing but success for the 2019-2020 season. And maybe we'll shake your hand someday and we'll get to meet each other in person. So, Coach, thanks again.
It has been my honor. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for what you do, getting the word out, getting the gospel out, encouraging others with your show, with Sports Spectrum, and all that you do. Just thank you so much. I've listened to you for years, and I'm glad to be on it today.
That was a lot of fun talking to Dr. George Barber, the men's basketball coach at Greenville University. And that's why I love that this podcast is now a daily podcast, because when we were just once a week, it was very hard to find guests and to even be able to have them on the show, like George Barber, somebody who's coaching at Greenville University, a Division III school, small school in Southern Illinois. But I love that we're able to find these stories and bring them to you and show you that God is doing things that nobody could imagine at places like Greenville University. Just because they're not on ESPN every night doesn't mean God can't do wonderful things through sports in places like Greenville. So thanks to Dr. George Barber, Coach Barber, for joining us here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. Thanks to you for listening, and thanks to Compassion International, our sponsors here at Sports Spectrum. $38 a month, tax deductible, and a chance, an opportunity, a blessing to release a child from poverty and give a child hope. That's what it's about. That's what compassion is about. And that's what we're about here at Sports Spectrum, partnering with them and giving you access and an opportunity to do just that. Go to the website compassion.com/sportsspectrum, compassion.com/sportsspectrum. You'll see a list of children waiting to be released from poverty and a great opportunity for you to do just that through Compassion International. Go to the website compassion.com/sportsspectrum and pray about releasing a child from poverty today. Thanks for listening to this episode of Sports Spectrum. We'll see you next time with a brand new episode. Check out our website, sportsspectrum.com. Give us a follow on our social media pages, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And let us know that you heard Dr. George Barber's story here on Sports Spectrum. See you next time with a new episode. This is the Sports Spectrum Podcast. Have a great rest of your day.